there's not this sense that you need a coach for life. Like even though life coaching is much bigger than it used to be, 20 years ago, there's a huge amount of resistance that people have to allowing themselves to believe that they need help.
All right, welcome to the Carla Rand Show, where I'm on here with Andy Petranek. And Andy and I, we met 10 years ago or something like that. I think it was, Andy, maybe not, 5 years ago, somewhere in there, where we met at this business mastermind. And at the time, you were doing fitness coaching, training, and I was as well. And so we kind of met that way. And then I hadn't seen you for a while. And then all of a sudden your Facebook stuff kind of started to pop on my feed. And I was like, Andy, I remember we had so many good talks and it was so fun. And we totally just weren't connecting at all since then, right? And I just wanted to reconnect with you and find out kind of what you're doing. And I find out now that you are actually a professional life coach. So you've transitioned from the fitness industry. And so I want to learn a lot from you, Andy. And I'm really excited that our listeners can learn too. So welcome to the Carla Rand Show.
Thanks. It's good to be here. It's fun to reconnect. And it's cool. It's great.
I'm excited to hear from you, Andy. And I know that you said you're doing a lot of things different. A lot of things have changed with you since we talked last. So I really kind of want to hear about those transitions and how you got to from where you were to where you are now. So first of all, just tell us, where did you grow up, Andy? A little bit about your family growing up and then kind of how you got into the fitness industry. Sure.
It's a very strange how I got there because it doesn't make really any sense. It does make sense because it's my life, but I grew up in a family of musicians. My mom and dad were both classically trained musicians. My mom's a violinist and a composer, and my dad is a violist and orchestra conductor. And we, I was wearing suits and tuxedos before I was 3, and going to concerts. And I played every instrument. I ended up playing the trumpet. I played the trumpet at a very high level, and I excelled. It just became my natural thing. And I ended up getting accepted into the Eastman School of Music, which is, if you haven't heard of it, it's like Juilliard, which most people have heard of. They only take 4 classical trumpet players a year to go there. And in fact, one of my classmates now is the principal trumpet player in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So it's that level.
I didn't know that, Andy. Did you know that I am also I have a music major, an education degree with a music major. So I grew up playing piano, singing. I actually went to university and played all the different instruments, so I did trumpet, I did all the woodwinds. And I didn't excel at your level, obviously, but I did that too. That's so cool. I didn't know that.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah. It would never have come up because why would it?
Right.
We were not in that context,
Yeah.
And then, then when I went to college, my mom had suggested when we were at a college fair looking at the ROTC programs. And I don't think she really had any inclination that I should be in the military. It wasn't some premeditated thing. It was just well, that's interesting. They have scholarships and you could get your way paid through college. And I didn't have to do that because there was enough money probably to at least get me 3/4 of the way through college. But I applied and I got accepted to the NROTC, Naval ROTC program, and which was also kind of weird because I was this music major, ROTC, candidate, and because there were none of those. Most of everybody had normal degrees, and I got to college, and I essentially once I kind of broke away from the orbit of the music in my life. I was very much woohoo, let's go explore other stuff. So girls and fraternities and beer and intramural sports. And I just moved away. I just kind of gravitated away from music. And I think I always had a propensity to judge the fact that I was a musician. And because I wasn't normal, I was so good. I was treated differently, and that always bothered me. And so it was almost kind of a natural thing for me to leave. It wasn't hard for me at all to leave music. But I left it behind. I was in ROTC. I ended up going into the Marine Corps and right after college. And that was really my entry point because of all the training that I did to go into the Marines and then the training in the Marines. That was my entry point into the physical world and fitness, indirectly into fitness. After I graduated, I got a I rode my bike across the country. That was a big event that occurred. I got a job with a Fortune 500 company. And I also discovered adventure racing, which was a brand new thing. There was a race that Mark Burnett was producing called the Eco Challenge. It was going to be in Utah, and I wrote a $10,000 check. I'm like, I'm in. I want to go do this race. I don't know how to do it. I don't know who my teammates are going to be, but I was like, I'm in. And we got one of the last spots in the race, and that opened up an 8-year career in adventure racing.
That's so cool. So, Andy, has anybody ever described you as intense? Do people think intense? Like you're an intense person?
Kind of.
Or hardcore? Hardcore?
Yes. I mean, like the stuff that I do is intense and hardcore, but I don't have the typical hardcore, mindset. I'm very loose and free. So I don't relate to that so much.
Well, it's just funny because it's like, okay, so you're like this very high level musician, right? And then you go to the Marine Corps. It's pretty intense, okay?
Yeah, right.
And then you do this adventure racing, and then you're like that's all very intense stuff.
And then I do CrossFit. I was one of the first CrossFit gyms that I opened. Yeah, you're right. So like intensity really suits me, I guess.
Like you're just drawn to that. Like, you know what I mean? If it's intense, like Andy's in, right?
Yeah, right. Right. I competed in the CrossFit Games back in 2009.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, like I was capable of doing this stuff. It wasn't, a lot of it was not, my mindset was never, I'm going to go do that and win it, or I'm going to go do that. And, it just these things kind of happen.
Okay. So you got into fitness. Tell me a little bit about, what was it called? The Whole Life, or what was that?
The Whole Life Challenge.
The Whole Life Challenge. So, you started that. Tell me a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a game. So we were trying to figure out how we could incorporate nutrition or habits that were more based in what you do on your own into the training program at our gym. And I had started this thing. It was called the Petranek Fitness Challenge, like 7 years before. But 7 years, or even before I opened the gym. In like 2003, I started the Petranek Fitness Challenge. And it was an event for my clients to give them some context to their training. So you would test yourself in 5 to 10 different events, and each person would get a chance to test themselves, and they'd set a benchmark. And then like 8 to 10 weeks later, they'd come back and we'd do it again. And it'd be like this mini Olympics. And everybody would have everybody contributed. I think at the time I was charging like $1,000 to do it. I took a couple $100 or $300 or something. And then the rest of the money went into this pot. So the pot was pretty big. I mean, I had probably 12 people in the first challenge, and I think the first place got like $7,000. So it wasn't this little measly thing. There was actually a real reason to go out and do this. And it gave people, what people started doing is they started sleeping better. They started eating better. They started doing things and treating themselves like an athlete, like somebody that was going to the Olympics. And that was the whole point of this Petranek Fitness Challenge. And I had done that for like 7 years, super successful, lots of fun. And we incorporated that into our programming at the gym. But we were trying to figure out at the gym, how do we incorporate nutrition in a way that's fun, enrolling, that's not us forcing it down people's throat? And we got the idea, me and Michael, he was my general manager at the time. What if we were to incorporate these healthy habits into some sort of a game, like the Petranek Fitness Challenge? So you'd set a benchmark at the beginning, you'd do a benchmark at the end, but there were points, and you get these points for nutrition and points for mobility each day and points for sleeping and we started playing with this idea, and we came up with a real basic point framework, and we launched it in the gym because it wasn't supposed to be anything other than for our members of the gym. We had 2 software engineers who talked us off the ledge of using Google spreadsheets to do this whole thing. And they wrote this real basic program for us to log in and do it. And we had that was the Whole Life Challenge. That was the first Whole Life Challenge. We had 150 people in it. And it was absolutely transformative. The gym, the community, what people were doing outside of the gym, the communication that was taking place in and among the community without us feeding or forcing them. They were just doing it because it was fun. I think that first or second one, we had them all, as they lost weight and changed shape, we had them bring in their old clothes, and we we would hang them from the rafters in the gym. So we started accumulating pairs of jeans and pants hanging up in the rafters. And by the time the challenge was over, there were probably 30 pairs or 40 pairs of clothes hanging from the rafters in the gym. It was really cool. And
nice.
Then we donated all those to Goodwill. But it was so good that we decided, hey, we got to make a version of this where other people can do this. Other gyms can do it. And so we went out to a lot of the relationships I had as a CrossFit gym owner. And I had started a business teaching other CrossFit gyms how to do business. And so we went out to those people, and suddenly we had like 10,000 people in the first Whole Life Challenge. Like we had a global Whole Life Challenge, and boom. And that was really extraordinary. We did that it's still going on today. The Whole Life Challenge, wholelifechallenge.com. There's a challenge that starts on, I don't know when this is going to air, but on July 2nd, they do 4 a year. They're 6 weeks long, and they're considering my background and intensity, this is the antithesis of that. This is about developing really basic, fundamental daily practices that will sustain you for the rest of your life. Like you can do this forever. It's not hardcore. It's not like try to go out and bust out 100 pull-ups and 200 squats and 300 sit-ups and, in 3 minutes. So it's kind of interesting that those two things are an interesting kind of seesaw,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so cool that you did that. And I mean, so like, again, right. So Andy, it's like, you're doing all these things. They're kind of intense. They're kind of hardcore. You're being successful at the things that you're doing. And then all of a sudden now you've got this business. All right. And now this business is successful and it's going well. And now you're a professional life coach. So how did you go from the Whole Life Challenge to kind of what you're doing now? What happened?
So that was a big tumultuous transition. I had been really nurturing this thing with my partner since 2011, but I had really been in the game of creating context for training since like 2003 when the Petranek Fitness Challenge started. So in 2018, we were on fire. I mean, we had a staff. We had about 10 people working for me. And I think we met at the beginning of 2019 when this was all going down. I remember very specifically what was happening. We had track. I don't know. I was envisioning this being the retirement from the need to work. Not that I would necessarily retire, but like, okay, we're gonna grow this thing. We're gonna sell it. It's gonna mean that we'd be okay. My family would be okay. Mm-hmm. And then in January 2019, we, instead of growing at the rate which we've been growing year over year, we've grown at about 20%. We were anticipating. We had 28,000 people in January of 2018. We were anticipating having 31,000 people in the January challenge of 2019. And instead of that, we had 15,000 people in the January challenge, kind of out of the blue. And it caused a lot of inner upset. A lot of inner upset and outer upset, because we're like, what the hell's going on? How did this happen? But I started to make a whole bunch of changes that I'd been envisioning for really 2 or 3 years in the way we were doing things. I was a co-CEO with my business partner, and he kind of deferred to me during that period because I had this vision that these things need to change and let's just change them. And it was very disruptive. It was really disruptive to my staff. My staff was not aligned with a lot of the stuff we were doing. It was disruptive to our customer base because some of the messaging started to change. And I gave myself a very short window with which to change things, thinking that, we'd be right back up in April and we'd be right, or even the summer challenge. And we weren't. And right the weekend that I met you, I had my first panic attack. And I woke up one of those mornings we were in Banff, and I thought I needed to go to the hospital. Like, it was bad.
I don't remember that. Did you not talk about it, or did I just not remember?
No, I didn't talk about it. I talked about it with Nick, but I didn't talk about it with anybody else.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what was going on. I'd never had this in this whole period of time. This is another weird overlay. In 1996, I met someone who was to become my first life coach. And she didn't go by the term life coach. She was more like, she called her company the Communication Arts Company. But I started studying kind of inadvertently a lot of this stuff, this spiritual stuff, this stuff like that is like the fabric of the world that we live in. And I had then gone back to get a master's degree in spiritual psychology back in 2011. And this was all in the background of my life. Like I didn't really use it for anything. And so I had studied anxiety and worry and panic attacks. And I had done coaching with and counseling with people through my spiritual psychology work that were dealing with stuff like that. So I had a very good mental concept of what they were and how to communicate with people that had it, but I'd never had it. And there was part of me that thought, that's nice. You have anxiety, you're worried. Great. Get a good night's sleep, take a couple of aspirin, wake up in the morning and it'll be all gone and you'll move on with your life. Right. Well, it didn't work that way.
Surprise.
It was stuck on me for, about 9 months. When I came back from Banff, about a month later, I had to take a leave of absence from the company. I was just a wreck. I couldn't really function. There was a period of time when I was afraid to leave my house. It just undermined my whole concept of who I was. I think that I had built up this image of myself in my mind of my enoughness, my inner confidence was based on my outer experiences in the world. And as long as the world saw me as successful, saw me as winning, saw me as strong, saw me as like, I'm the guy with the answers and that can help other people, then I was okay. But as soon as the fabric of that started to get tested, I fell apart. And it was more than tested. In my mind, I failed. In my mind, the business was done. I was done. And even though that's not true, it's still, like I said, it's still going on today.
That was your perception. That was your perception at the time. Yes.
And my story that I was running in my head.
Yeah.
And it took all of that year, at least. I mean, I started to come back right before COVID hit. And then COVID hit. And, I worked with Michael on creating some stuff that helped people navigate COVID and helped our community navigate COVID. But the business never really bounced back from that big disruption. And in June, I just had there was one meeting we had where I just had a really strong, intuitive, like, I'm done here. I can't keep doing this. This is, I feel like I'm a fish swimming upstream.
Kind of like you're going through the motions, but you maybe don't have that joy or that passion anymore, or just it's too difficult, or
it was too difficult. It was too, when you have a challenge that is when the only product you have is a $50 or $60 product, because we didn't have layers of products. One person or two people don't really make a difference. So me having a conversation with you just one-on-one, not on a podcast, while I may change your life, like the Whole Life Challenge has made significant changes to thousands of people around the world. But to me, one person in terms of putting food on my family's table didn't matter. And I think social media contributed to that, like getting likes, getting people to follow, getting thousands of listeners, I needed thousands and thousands of people. And like the quest for more became really negative for me inside. Like one person does matter. Every person matters. And I could no longer allow myself to be in a business where that was the challenge. Like I needed to reset my thinking. I needed to go back to the way it was when I was just a personal trainer and one-on-one, like working with individual people. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I had dabbled in life coaching. I had maintained a few clients from my personal training days. Not fitness clients, but we were working on really the mental and emotional aspects of eating and working out and training. And so I had an idea and I thought, well, I'll just, transition to this. And, in my head, it was going to be much easier than it turned out to be. Establishing a business around this. But the coaching, as it turned out, it was something that I feel like I was kind of born to do. Like I've been doing it for 25 years, in terms of my fitness life, in terms of my Marine Corps. I mean, I was doing it when I was in the Marine Corps. I was doing it in my challenge days, guiding people and leading people and coaching people and helping people through what I do, like through my own example and through communicating with them. And because of the 25 years of my own inner work that I'd been doing, it was very easy for me to start teaching that. Because it wasn't easy for me to believe that I could, because there was a lot of imposter syndrome and,
who am I?
I'm not ready for this. And there are other people that are way better than this than I am. But in terms of when I let go of that and I just showed up as all of me, it was just incredibly natural and super powerful and super deep with everybody that I've worked with.
So let's say I come up to you, Andy, and I say, Andy, I need you to life coach me. What's the first thing you want to know? Like, what are kind of the questions to sort of get somebody, like what do you need to know about me in order to work with me, let's say?
Well, what's going on? Like, why?
Why now?
What is it that has you say you need a life coach? And what is your picture of what life coaching is? And is there something wrong? Do you want to upgrade in your life and nothing's wrong and you just want to get better at something? Or are you having a spiritual, are you having guidance that you need to get a deeper spiritual context with your life and with the world, or a connection to God or religion or whatever it is? Because those are all things that I help people with, or something's going bad in a relationship, or something's going bad in your career. You need a new career, or you think you need a new career. Those are really the most important things first, is to find out. I ask a lot of questions. Because
you want to know, if somebody's going to come to you, Andy, there's a reason. Most people aren't running around like, hey, I got to find a life coach. If they're looking for a life coach, like you said, they want to level up in their life somehow, or they want to overcome some sort of obstacle or barrier, probably, right?
Well, here's the other interesting thing, Carla, is most people don't come to me. Mm-hmm. Most people don't. There's not this sense that you need a coach for life. Like even though life coaching is much bigger than it used to be, 20 years ago, there's a huge amount of resistance that people have to allowing themselves to believe that they need help. Like there's something inherently wrong with them. That's the inner dialogue that a lot of people have, that there's something, I should be able to figure this out. I mean, I'm just living my life. Why can't I figure this out on my own? Like, don't be an idiot. You don't need to talk to somebody about this. You just get a better job. Just move to a different state and your relationship will get better.
Get more sleep.
Life will get better. Get more sleep, right? Your health will get better, right? So it's most of the time I'm offering to people to have deep conversations. You want to have a conversation about something going on in your life? Is there something going on in your life that would be worthy of you spending 2 hours having a deep conversation about it? And if the answer to that question is yes, then maybe there's something in there that's worthy of spending 6 months on or a year on in working out or figuring out. Now, some people do have a better idea and do come to me. There are a few people that have come to me directly, but that's by far the minority. So there's a lot of flushing out. There's a lot of experimenting. Like if I were to offer to you, hey, Carla, let's sit down and have a couple hour conversation. Is that something you want to do, first of all? Because not everybody wants to do that. In that conversation, I don't go in with any preconceived notions. I don't go in with any, it's just really an exploration into life. And I would start asking you questions about what's going on in your life. What had you say yes? What is it about your life that you want to explore? What areas are, if you had 2 hours to have the most important conversation of your life, what would be the topic? What would be the thing we'd talk about? in those 2 hours? What's the thing that you know needs flushing out that you don't tell anybody else about, that you don't discuss with your husband or your wife or your partner, that nobody knows except what's going on inside of you. Nobody knows it's off. Nobody knows it's slightly out of whack except you. What would that thing be?
So it's like a confidential conversation where you can start to explore, because I think we all know, Andy, that it's one thing to think about something, but when you start talking about it, sometimes just talking about it makes all the difference, right?
Yeah. There's something really different about allowing your thoughts to get out into reality. Like something changes when those come out of your mouth and when there's someone else to receive it. Like it wouldn't be the same if I was sitting in here talking to the room. It certainly might be different than just thinking what I think, but it's not the same when somebody's there to receive it and hear it. And so it's a really unique experience to be in that sort of a environment where there's a willingness to talk through things that are hard, that are deep, that are important and meaningful to you in your life, whether they're good or bad, or working or not working, or you need to up-level them or whatever, in the presence of somebody who's actually holding space and listening. Like, it's just a unique thing. Like I have no idea. I don't go into any of these conversations having any idea what the hell we're going to even talk about. And I think that's magical. That's really amazing. That's how it all happens.
It's so interesting because you were in that business where you're trying to get as many people as you can. Let's just get them in, you know, and it's just like the masses. And now you're completely pivoted, Andy. And now you're looking at the person as an individual to the point where you won't even have any kind of a system. You just look at, okay, what is, I'm just going to listen. And I think, isn't that really the truth though, Andy, is becoming a good listener is probably one of the most helpful things that you can do for people. I know I've had conversations with people, sometimes two-hour or more conversations where the person is just talking and I'm just, okay, yeah, well, that must have felt like this, or wow, that's interesting. Like, let me ask this question. And at the end of it, they're just like, that was so helpful. And all I'm doing is listening. Like, I'm not even, what I mean? Like, I don't have any magic. I'm just like listening to them and they're figuring it out.
Listening deeply is a skill. It's being able to hold space and being able to listen deeply, being able to listen for what's under what they're talking about and what's really present. It's something that I've been working on for 10 years, like becoming a better listener, becoming more able to stay engaged and to stay present and to because we all have the inner voice, right? That's happening. I have to quiet my own inner voice so that I can really be present with you. Because if my inner voice gets loud, if you say something that triggers something inside of me, my inner voice starts yapping away. And whether that's a good voice or a bad voice, it's still a voice and it's getting in the way. And so the louder that voice and the more distracting that voice, the more difficult it becomes to actually give your essence of who you are to that other person through your listening, through your attentiveness, through your presence.
And listening,
you're not really present.
And listening to what they're saying rather than what you think you should tell them, or what do you know what I mean? Like, instead of pulling, they must mean this, or it's like, no, what is actually going on with them? You need to ask those questions so that you understand them, not so that you can put what you think onto them. You know what I mean, Andy? Like, it's kind of
100%.
Yeah. But I love what you're doing, Andy. And it's really interesting to me kind of where I'm at with my life too. And I think sometimes like how you've transitioned with music and then Marine Corps and then fitness and then business and all of this kind of stuff. And now this professional life coaching. I think what that shows me also is you have seasons in your life, Andy. And I think when we first get started in our teenage years or 20s or whatever, that looks different than when we hit our 30s and then when we hit our 40s. And like, as we age, I think we start to see different things. And that's why I think you don't as often see life coaches that are in their 20s, because I mean, what do they really have to offer in their 20s? Like, I guess if they work with, 10-year-olds, I suppose they have something to offer. You know what I'm saying? But like, you need to live, right? And you need to do something so you can share it. right? And so I think that we all have a lot to learn from somebody like you, because you have done quite a few different types of things and been successful at all of those things to some degree, right? Yeah. So I think it's like, what makes a person do that? And when do you shift? When do you know it's time to shift? Right? Yeah. Like from music to the Marine Corps, to CrossFit, to the Whole Life Challenge, to now, life coaching. When do you know it's time? And it's okay to shift, right? I think that's the other thing. People, they get so stuck in something, and learning that it's okay to shift. And like, so that was for me too, Andy. Like, I don't want to be a failure, right? Like, I got to be perfect at everything I do. Well, that's insane amounts of pressure. So I'm putting that pressure on myself all the time, that I have to be so perfect at everything. But I'll be able to kind of step back and say, okay, who really am I? What is actually going on? And it's like, I'm 40. Like, seriously, Carla, you don't know the answer to that question, but it keeps changing, Andy. Like, as soon as you say, oh, this is who I am, well, then something shifts. Like, there's a different season, or, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, I like this too. And I like that too. And like, it's so open. So I think, like, for me, my whole life, it's been all about busting open those boxes, right? It's like, I don't really want to fit in any boxes. I can be a musician and artsy, and I can also be like a hardcore fitness instructor. Boom, a jock and an art, somebody who's in the arts, right? I can be a mom, and I can be an entrepreneur. I can be, an outdoors person, and then I can also like stay inside all day and, I don't know, do whatever, right? Like, I want to just be anything and whatever I need to be in the moment, not so much like, does that make sense?
Yeah. See, like, yes. And I, the way you framed it, I think is really good. Like, the way you framed kind of my life, and then what you've got going on and what you can do. I think the thing for me that, the thing that I've always tried to solve is the problem of feeling like I'm enough, I'm good enough, I'm worthy. And all these strategies over the years, all these successful endeavors that I've done have all been in hopes that I could solve that inner pain inside that it didn't occur to me as pain when I was going through it. But now that I look back on it, that's what was driving it. Like, all of these things were strategies to help me solve the problem of Andy's not enough. Andy's not good enough. Andy's not worthy. Andy's not. So I'm going to go be successful. The Marines must be the answer. The trumpet must be the answer first. And then the Marines must be the answer. And then, fraternity and college life must be the answer. And then adventure racing. No, that must be the answer. No, succeeding in business. Because I had, as a sales rep, I had President's Club and, like all these accolades. That must be, nope, that's not it. And I think what happened was the universe kind of handed me kind of gave me a big kick in the ass when the Whole Life Challenge didn't work, and go, hey, wait a second. You're just on a treadmill. You're just on a hamster wheel trying to figure out what the next big thing is. And that thing that you've been searching for, this peace, this inner okayness, is there. It's always been there. It's never not been there. You just were disconnected from it from a very early age, and have been chasing it from the time you were, 5 years old.
I love how you just articulated that. It just blew something up in my brain, Andy. Like, I've been doing the exact same thing. I've been doing the same thing, Andy. Like, exactly, like chasing this. So, okay, like I have 6 kids, right? So like, I've got all these kids. I'm going to be the best darn mom ever. I'm a wife. I'm going to be the best darn wife. I'm going to be the best fitness coach. I'm going to be the best at everything I do. It's just this drive to be successful at every single thing. But then if something fails, like it does, right? Like, I've failed as a mom, failed as a wife, failed as a fitness coach in different ways. It just like, it either destroys you, or you end up pushing it down and just like, no, I'm not going to tell anybody about that because I'm going to pretend that everything's okay. Or you have to actually face it and say, wait a sec, am I actually a failure? Or is there something else going on here that like I'm actually defined by more than just what I do, Yeah. And I think a lot of that can, it's personality, it's upbringing, it's all these different influences on you, your teachers, your education system, whatever. But this drive to be successful, what does real success even look like? I wish we had more time, Andy. What is your message to the world? What does everybody need to know, do you think, Andy, based on your experience and working with clients? What do we need to know?
Really, we're all looking for freedom. We're all looking for freedom from this mental prison that we've put ourselves in, whether you know it or not. That's really what our goal is with a bigger house or with a bigger car or with, more success, bigger bank accounts. We think that those things are going to create freedom. And what I would say is none of that stuff will ever create freedom. The freedom comes from forgiving yourself for the judgments that you've held yourself to against yourself, and to reconnect with your heart and with your own self-love, because it's the self-love that's missing, that gives you the return to your source, the return to your ability. Because really what you can't give to yourself, you really can't give to the world. And so I think the world needs more inner orientation, self-forgiveness, and self-love. And that's it.
And that's a lot. I mean, you just said that, like, it's, let's just check those 3 boxes or those 2 boxes, self-forgiveness, self-love. Okay, boom, off I go, right? It's not that easy. So
it's not that easy.
If somebody's sitting there saying, okay, well, how do I do that, Andy? I mean, you can't tell them all the steps or whatever, but where can they start?
The funny thing is there are no steps.
Okay.
It's starting to wake up. It's starting to, read some books, like a great couple books. One book is Conversations with God. It's a great, great, great spiritual book. It starts to challenge some of the beliefs that we all have been kind of handed over the course of our lives. Another great book is Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul, because it starts to open your eyes to, wow, this is a framework that I didn't really consider. Like, there's actually something else going on. There are multiple layers to the world as we know it. And you start to just open yourself up to these things. And it's very different. It's very weird at first. Like, the idea that we need to be more, most people would call it selfish. It's not selfish. It's put the oxygen mask over your mouth first and learn how to create that acceptance and love inside yourself, so that then that can leak out and spill over into the rest of the world. So it's a slow process. There's really no great steps to doing it. It's just starting to become aware.
See, I knew this podcast was going to go this way, Andy. I knew once I started talking to you, I'd want to talk to you more. So we're going to have to wrap up this podcast, but like, I will be messaging you, and I know you're busy.
We'll do another one. We'll do another one.
We'll do another one. We'll maybe have a chat. Like, I don't know. I just feel like you have a lot to offer, and like, I'd love to hear more. So thank you for being on here,
welcome.
Andy. Okay.
You're welcome.
Hey, it's Carla. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast today. I have 3 things I want to tell you about myself. But first, please go check out my company, Power Fitness Online. PowerFitnessOnline.com or Power Fitness Online, Facebook or Instagram. What I do there is I help you. I train you so you can get fit, strong, healthy, have energy, feel good, and be at your best. Because in this life, we want to be at our best. I do, you do, we all do. So here's 3 facts about myself. Number 1, I've been a fitness trainer for 20 years. Yes, 20 years. Number 2, I'm 5'4 3/4, not 5'4 1/2, none of that. 5'4 3/4. Number 3, I have 6 kids. Yes, they're all my own. None of them were twins. They're all my own. I had them one at a time, and I love my kids so much. So remember, go to powerfitnessonline.com if you want to get fit and stay fit.